حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Let's make dua inshallah and start. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa shafi'ina wa habibina wa maulana Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. Allahumma rabbana zidna ilman nafi'ah wa amalan mutaqabbala wa rizqan wasi'a wa shifaa' min kulli da'. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Shall we continue with our topic on Islam and Muslims in the modern world? And we have dealt with a number of so far 4 sessions of it, in which we have looked at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One, has given us the ability to use and access the world and benefit from the world. Then 2, the contribution of the Muslims to the modern world. And 3, we also looked at the Muslims' fall and the Crusades, when it took place and what was the condition of the Muslims. And 4th, we now look at the Western view of Muslims in the modern Western world, how they look at us. And we look also as well as to what was the condition of it, that they look at us as being boastful of the medieval time, and that Muslims are backward, basically. They would say that we are, we do not have that ability in law, in the ability to do some type level of contribution to the world in terms of what the world is today. Now, these are just perspectives of views. We also discussed those things as well. We also looked at the act that they tell us that we are people who want to fight and kill everybody, and we also look at how that is also a negative, propaganda as well. And because that's only just 1% or 2%, and the 98% of the remaining world Muslim population do good, but 2% is the only thing that can actually attract the media. There are also views that we look at that was used basically by which Muslims in the Western world, like other people, have fallen prey or difficulty and challenges by the West. And those are 6 basically things that we mentioned that it affects us and keeps us checking at bay. 1 is the competition, 2 science, 3 medicine, 4 work ethics, 5 democracy, and 6 consumerism. These were the things that are used by the Western world to basically control the affairs and take control of the world as Muslims. And those are the things that we looked at basically up to this point in time. And now, continue from where we left off, and that's at the last point we have spoken about it, that hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that he see the either ends of the world, in which Allah showed him the success of the ummah and how much domination it had over the world. But after showing us that, he also prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect this ummah, save this ummah from disaster and from being overpowered and all of these different things. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in that hadith and tells the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam that Allah's decree is certain and is sure, and whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, that will come to pass. And he says, amongst the things that this ummah will not be destroyed by any army or any other army or anybody come together in the whole world coming together cannot destroy Islam. But what will destroy Islam and the Muslims will be Muslims. That they will fight and kill each other and they will imprison each other. These are amongst the differences that was spoken about that the ummah will have in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this was the fear and the worry that we faced and we have discussed up to that point in time. Now, coming back to our discussion, looking at what the Western world looks at us as Muslims and what they consider us to be. So during the colonial period, this negative historical image of Islam on page 8 of Islam in the European gained important new functions when it was used to legitimize the subjection of almost the entire Muslim world by a few European superpowers. So basically in the European era, there were basically four main dominant powers that would share the world, all right? England, Europe, Germany, France, they were amongst those leaders in the European world. And they would share which island who would take what, who would rule where. So they would share, like British, and you had, for example, part of Trinidad, we would say, that was ruled by almost all of them pass through and plunder us. So that basically we have part of French in us, we have Spanish with us, we had British with us, and you know, those types of things affected the way the islands were run because there were different types of what? Colonization. So that level of colonization, what Islam had to face was also similar to that in the part of the, what we call the so-called Muslim world. So colonization also hit that part of the world as well, but with Muslims at that point in time selling out to one another so that they were able to grab power. I talk about this a couple hundred years ago, 400 years ago. That was the nature of the Muslims at that point in time. They would negotiate and work towards getting their own position and getting their own ownership of certain states and land. So no longer they were working as a one empire state or Islam being by under a khilafat or leadership anymore. Now it comes to the period when they started to talk about colonization and they put persons as a governor, or now they call themselves kings or these types of things. And this level of leadership now was not just based on a person voting for someone in democracy, but someone installed as a leader. And this is how it started in that part of the world. So it had reached all of India, colonization. But from what Islam had to go through was a challenge, because in other words, to be people who were leading, and now after being in that position for hundreds of years, not just 1 year, but hundreds of years, you know, overcoming obstacles and challenges. But now the fact is that what they had as a level of control, no longer they have it, and they have been led. And this is after they have faced brutal killings by the Crusaders who came and colonized these lands. So the Christian attack on Islam, which were directed towards the foundation of its religion validity, at that point in time, this was the objective. But now, instead, in our modern world, their attack were built on modern Darwinist foundation. What this tells us, that they no longer talk about Christianity being the dominant force. So that picture just erased, and they started talking about modernism. They started talking about the world having a new area of understanding. No longer talking about Christianity, but talking about an aspect that we, the Muslims, are no longer fit in the modern world. Change from what the picture of the word, instead of saying crusade, now we could say modern. So it basically tells a different story, but yet the mission and the objective still continue to see that the Muslim world continue to face persecution after persecution. Hundreds and hundreds of years are going, and the same principles of persecution continue to be relentless against the Muslims. So this was the new image, or the new cause, or the new fight. In this context, world regions were put in an evolutionary framework with the upshot that Islam was considered to be a degeneration of the ultimate truth, and Christianity was paraded as the ultimate end of the evolutionary process, which historically rooted prejudice and transmitted through education, especially through children's school books. Now, in Trinidad, that was a problem as well. When we know that when people had to give up their religion, when they came to Trinidad and when they were propagating Christianity, they had to give up their faith in order to get into the teaching service and many other different types of things. These are part of our history that we are aware of, and it didn't happen just in Trinidad alone. All right? It didn't happen in the Caribbean alone, but it happened in all parts of the world that they went with the crusade. They had to give up your religion if you wanted to follow, and you had to adapt to this principle. This was the ultimate way that they showed that their method was the way or there's no other way. So they transformed and made Christianity look in this fashion as being the best thing that is out to save everyone. In the decoration of the modern world. Forgetting and putting Islam and the knowledge about Islam in the books of the students, saying that Islam, would read that it was spread by the sword and there were people who were butchered and all these type of things. These were what Muslim children were taught long ago, and you would hear from people that this is what Islam was. So this negative propaganda didn't start now, but it started hundreds of years ago, and even in our own island we would have seen that this was the negative propaganda that started amongst us. And alhamdulillah, in that time there were Muslims who were aware of this, and they worked continuously to get these type of history be erased from the books that they were written in for those students at that time. So efforts were made, and alhamdulillah, that changed. That level of history and that thought of history was changed. So even here we see this, but in other parts of the world we're talking about what aspect of Islam we're talking about here. We're talking where Islam is being subjugated and put to that position of being a religion that is totally incapable of doing anything. So this is the picture that the modern Christian world wants to paint about Muslims and Islam. Now, the truth of this is that there are many historians that we mentioned previously who would have told us differently to what is being portrayed today in media. In order to correct the present shortcomings in the education sector in Europe concerning Islam and Muslims, the books concerned can be adjusted in various ways. First of all the negative information about Islam can be erased from the literature designed for the youth, and at the same time, objective and complete information about Islam and Muslims can be added to these books. But this will be changing for the Muslims to get it right once more, as they themselves lack the necessary support and practical and spiritual submission to Islamic values that can be as a benefit to the people of the West. So the real problem is that the Muslims themselves lack the ability, the spiritual strength, the knowledge that is required for them to actually make that change. In other words, if the Muslims have if we even go to examine, the next point we're going to come to, is if we look at Muslims and ask ourselves how many Muslims show interest to Islam today, or have developed the skill and the ability to use and utilize Islam in their life effectively. Because that is also lacking. So if there is a lack of Islam and Islamic knowledge and awareness amongst the Muslims in general, I'm saying that all of us are the same. We're just saying that there may be, in every community, if we examine how many people are really interested in learning Deen, you will find in a percentage maybe 10%. And the next 90% of the Muslims, what are they really doing? Yes, they might be busy doing all types of things, they have all types of excuses. But if Islam is to be flourished again, then it becomes alive and it becomes active for the entire community to see. And even in our own community, we only recognize that happens in only 1 month. And we are aware of that month. And that month is the month of Ramadan. And even in the first 10 days of the Ramadan, you'll find them busy in the mosque. And after that 10 days, the next 20 days, only until Eid after them becomes a little more busy in the last few days. Now, that is Islam by its culture and nature that Muslims have made it to be today. But the essence of Islam is not that. And this is one of our weaknesses in this part of the world, which we'll come and discuss further on. But looking at what the West have done is that they have actually created a generation and a next generation of people who have understood Islam to be something that is not right, that is wrong, that is barbaric, that is something that is evil. But what have the Muslims done to correct that generally? Are we going to leave it just for the scholars and the imams? And many people put blame on the scholars and the imams and the leaders because they are the ones supposed to make the change. But change is not by words. Change is by our actions, the way we live our lives, the way we express our Islam, the way how we live, so that people will be convinced that this religion, the people that follows and adhere to this deen, they don't fall prey to the evils of society. They don't fall prey to the evils of society. And that is a principle. And that makes a difference. The Ummah at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was not centered around these things, but they were rather centered around the aspect of action, that they demonstrated Islam practically. So why should the West adopt this view and this position? Why? Why did they look at this? Why did the people of the West in the world today should accept or look at Islam like this today? And we know that has not changed. Because if you look at media, and if you look at the media print even today on our newspapers, and in the news, it brings a fear to Muslims. So those Muslims who have a little bit of iman, they'll even be more frightened. They'll be afraid of expressing their Islam. And what is to be afraid of? That is the thing. What is to be afraid of? This is what is instilling fear in Muslims. And when this fear is instilled, it will take the faint-hearted and even run them away from Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save them from that type of, that fear. And then they will want to blame everybody else for what is happening. Or if you blame the 2% of people who is causing all this act of terror and causing harm to people. Now they are causing this, and we are saying that they are the cause, the whole Muslim world is at fault. Now, yes, they might share some part of the blame because they are doing something that is wrong, but the fact is that the entire Muslim Ummah is also a part to blame because we are sleeping on our deen. We are sleeping on our deen. And that is where we are faltering in our lives. So, if they are doing this, it doesn't mean that what they are doing is they are only doing what they think is right to safeguard themselves and their perception and their goal and their objective and their agenda is what they have in mind. So many see it as a marketing tool by the West, that they would use negative propaganda as a means of, displacing the Muslims and continue causing a level of disparity and a separation and segregation between the Muslims and the rest of the world, and bringing down the Islam, as we would say. So looking at that trend of population, we must understand what is happening to the world. So looking at the trends of population and their beliefs and culture, we can see below that agnostic atheist is climbing rapidly, which indicates that the West has the correct apparatus in place into making the world as a godless world. Because if you look at the condition today, and you look at what we mentioned here, Christianity is 2.2 billion in the world at 2012. This is the estimated time. Now this is way, way back, and look how far we are ahead of 5 years. We're more than this. Islam is 1.6 billion at that point in time. Secular, non-religious, agnostic, atheist group, they are 1.1 and they're almost close to 1.5 by now. So they are growing almost close to what Islam is, and Islam has often grown some more, Christianity has fallen some more. But even if Islam takes over the position of Christianity, which is a possibility, a high possibility, next it will be atheism. It tells you the trend that the world is going into. Right? Hinduism is 1 billion. This is a direct worry for all of the world. Because this is one of the things that we are told about that will happen in our times. The Prophet ﷺ told us that this is going to happen in our times, that people will no longer have the need and will be reciting what? The kalima. So even the Muslims will not be reciting kalima at a point in time. There will be the godlessness and the affairs that surround people who are godless will have no connection to any aspect of a fear of following anything except their own whims and desires. A person who has no God to worry about has nothing to worry and face. And they live their lives as they see it and as they feel to live it. So with that premise in mind, we are told, that in the Bible, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, concerning even the condition of the Christians that rule the world in a level of numbers today, as they being the leaders, we are told by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at this time would also exist. That Sami'atu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, he said, La taqumu sa'atu, that a time, the hour will not come, warumu aktharun nas, that the European people will be the most amount of people in the world today. In other words, the Romans, or that European aspect of the world, where we have Christians, they are dominating the world. He said the time will not come until this is in place. So, you know, they'll ask, why, what is it that will give them this dominance? You know, what gives them the dominant factor to be the leading group of people in the world, in majority? What gives them that strength? And many of the commentators at that point in time, and even amongst the Sahabas, they looked and pondered over this and think, you know, what could be the possible reason that they will lead the world? Why they will lead the world? And amongst these, they look at that when they ever fall in a fight, as they did fall, when they recover and double their strengths. And amongst them, there are people who are kind and receptive. And amongst them, you'd find that there are people who maintain relationships amongst themselves. No matter what the deviation in their sect, whether you are Christian, or Presbyterian, or Roman Catholic, whether you are Protestant, whatever you are in that religion, in terms of deviated sect among the Christians, it don't make a difference to them. You are still a Christian. But tell that to a Muslim. You follow anything, if it's a Sunni Muslim and you have all different things, whether it's a Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali, or whether it's a Gai Mukallid, or you have some other thing, whatever you're following a Bid'ah practice, whether you're following no practices at all, everybody fighting on everybody. Every Mufti fighting on every other Mufti. And each Mufti fighting each Mufti, and each Maulana fighting each Maulana. Down the road, down the Imam fighting, and the people fighting too. So we house on fire, and we burn it on the inside and we burn it on the outside too. That is the level of what? Frustration that we are living in. So they will rule because they have this level of understanding and kindness and receptiveness. That consciousness, that awareness they have, they build this on that principle and founding principle. So Sahabas, when they looked at the nature of these people, they knew that these are some of the qualities that they also had. Because they lived amongst them, they worked among them, and the Sahabas knew, even when they went to Abyssinia, they knew that the Christians were kind people. Because the first place that the Muslims went and seek refuge was where? Abyssinia. And they were accommodated by the king, and they were protected by the king from the what? Idolaters of Makkah. When they came to collect them back, they said, no, I'm going to keep them here and they're going to stay with me. And this was a Christian king at that point in time. It says not that they were what? You know, hostile towards the Muslims even in the early times. But we ourselves are hostile towards each other. We are killing each other, and that's a reality and a fact that even in those lands that we call so-called Muslim world, they are fighting each other. And even not in so-called Muslim world, but in the Western world, the few Muslims in their few percentage that live in these small little islands and all the different places in the world, they cannot seem to find a way of unity amongst themselves. And we talk about the Muslims. So if we can solve the problem and you expect the West to solve it, there is no way it could work like that. So in the short term, it is clearly in the interest of the West to promote greater cooperation and unity within its own civilization, particularly between the Europeans and North American components, to incorporate into the West societies in Eastern Europe and Latin America, whose strength and whose cultures are close to those of the West, to limit the expansion of military strength of Confucian China. That's what the knowledgeable person in China who had a big leadership role in the world at one point in time. And the Islamic or Muslim world. So they make sure that they have full control in all of Europe, that they call themselves and form themselves into a United Nation form that control and make sure that these parts of the world have no control. So be it Europe, be it China, be it the Islamic world, be it part of South America or northern part of the world, will have full control. To the extent or to the moderate reduction of Western military capabilities and maintain military superiority in the East and Southwest Asia to strengthen international institutions that reflect a legitimate Western interest. United Nations or the UN on international Western laws implemented to control the world. So the United Nations, they go into a country that has war, and their law is that you should be in that state of being protected by international law. And what is that international law? What these European nations are, because they make up the United Nations. And values to promote the involvement of non-Western states in those institutions. So they promote this. And at the end of this now, and the values to promote the involvement of non-Western states into those institutions. In order to trade or to do business with the West, you must sign all treaties and international laws of the West, which is known as compliance and subjugation to the West. So you want to do business in any part of the world, no problem, but your laws must be in conformity with their laws. You have to accept and sign everything. So any type of business, anything that we do, it have to be sanctioned by them. Now, what is the cost for such an army and such a function of the United Nations? Their army alone, for it to function effectively in its existing format, it requires billions and billions, or almost 26 or 264 billion or million dollars it takes just to run them for 1 year, US dollars. That is the well that they use to maintain ties. And what is the effect? What effect do they have on the world? So between 9 and 12 billion dollars, or over 200 something point they'll spend on different areas and parts of the world to just maintain peace. What type of peace? When we look at the flaws of the United Nations, when you look at Bosnia, when women were butchered and raped in Bosnia, the Muslims were killed and wiped off there, nothing was what? Done for any type of benefit for them there. If we look at Rwanda, again, United Nations played a role there, where thousands and thousands and thousands of people were killed again. You look at Haiti, till today they are maintaining what? Haiti, and Haiti, we can say, are the poorest amongst us, and they're still there. What is the benefit out of United Nations towards Haiti? Who really benefits? Who props it up? Who keeps it up? When you look today, even in our recent times, we talk about months ago, from the Muslims who were killed recently in Burma. I talk about thousands of Muslim women who were raped and children who were raped and killed. Right? And only now Bangladesh decided to put them in a remote island. But yet, whole of the Americans, United Nations did nothing to save these people. Now, this is the UN that is controlling the world. And the rest of the Muslim world, what do we say? What do we do? We talk about thousands of women being killed and raped, not one, thousands, by the Buddhist people and whoever remained in Burma. This was the destruction that came forth for the Muslims there. They ran them out because they say they're not part of that land. So they have no place to go, and no other Muslim countries are willing to accept them, and they're now keeping them in a little small island. So that they come as refugees in an island to stay. Now this is the nature and the condition. I talk about years now, I talk about just a couple of months now. And these things I think are happening before us, before our United Nations, that people think that we're supposed to help and protect, if they're to really protect Muslims and protect every other human beings, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslims. The fact is that this is what you'll do. But the fact that they will go to different places, even in Afghanistan, and certain schools that they will be protecting, they're the school that they go bomb up. If they go to Iraq, the places of buildings that they have as hospitals, they say the UN will protect that building, that's the exact building they're going to blow up. So we don't know if there was actually whatever the strategy and propaganda was, is that as though wherever they would pass, it brings total destruction to the Muslims wherever they go. This we see, and this we must understand, is that not that we are casting blame, but is what is evident. What is the real thing? What we see with our eyes and what we hear in the news, and how many people have been killed, and in particular Muslim people who have been murdered and butchered all over the world in our present time. The wars of today are not wars that were fought like many, many years ago. Today you fly in a plane, you blow up a whole building. One bomb and you finish so many people. Then you go in there and you kill from a side. You don't know who live and who die after that. Right? This is the nature of what war is like today. Now what it is, it is when a young child will go before Allah and say, what is the reason I was killed? Why I had to be bombed for? What did I do? Who are you really fighting? Me, the militants, who you really want? These are the nature of what we're looking at. If this is the only way that this particular problem or this issue of what we call militant Islam amongst that 2% or 3% population of people who we call Muslims who are doing this action, that the entire nation or community or entire country must be wiped out in order to take care of 2% of people. Just as they have done in Afghanistan to get rid of what? The Al-Qaeda in whatever that part was of the world. Afghanistan also had what? Come to an end. For a civilization to actually what? Revive from that. This is the nature and the condition of what the West has set up and what they view us as. So we are a threat towards them because they fear that we will destroy or harm them. No, we are Muslims. We live in the Western world. We can tell ourselves that we are pretty what? Safe or protected because we are citizens here. We're born and grow here. But that is until we see what is even happening to us as well. Because certain restrictions and positions have been placed upon us. I mean, we never expected these things. But we are saying because of certain groups of people, this is also what? Bringing harm and difficulty upon the rest of the Muslims here. So we ourselves here will say that those few Muslim people who have done that to us are putting all of us to take the blame. Or to take this hard and harsh draconian measures against all of the Muslims. So such acts are developed to what? Put restrictions on Muslims. Now that is just by the view of the West. This is what the West would view us to be. In long term, so that was the short-term plan. The short-term plan is just to understand how they control us. In long-term plan of the West has is to maintain the economic and military power necessary to protect its interests in relation to these civilizations. So they're thinking about now, they have already planned years ahead how they're going to control us and control these parts of the world. It will also, however, require the West to develop a more profound understanding of the basic religious and philosophical assumptions underlying other civilization and the ways in which people in those civilizations see their interests. If we look in their long-term plan, what do they think about the occupation of Palestine, the land for Jewish settlements, which is against UN laws? Even until today, we know that the Jews, they actually break the UN laws all the time. All the time. And that's the United Nations, but yet no one will ever stop them. Presidents would come and presidents would go. Years would come and these people are suffering and starving and they are being controlled like they're in a little chicken pen. We throw some feed for them and throw some water for them and that's how they'll survive. And we talk about Muslims who are living like this every day of their lives. They'll eat out of garbage cans and they'll eat out of whatever little food they get. And they've been monitored how they would move, how they would walk and whatever they would do. That is how these Muslims live there. Right? If this is the condition how human beings, let's just call ourselves Muslims, human beings, and then say that they are Muslims. Because every human being deserves the right to be protected and safeguarded, and at least they have the opportunity to live, and a right to have a place of shelter and food and medicine and all these different things that every part of the world is deserving of. Right? Yet they will talk about, that there are people who are facing. Yet they will say that so many of them are facing this level of hunger and starvation and difficulties and hardship. Out of this, how many of them will go to help? And what have the Muslim world done to even relieve methods or benefits towards these people? What have they done? Now, we cannot criticize the Muslim world now because they have done some things. They have done, not that they didn't do anything. But they cannot do as much as they could because they are also restricted in how they can do what they could do and how they could help. And even so, even if people from here send wealth in terms of aid, you send it in the wrong group and the wrong hands, you could find yourself in trouble. Because this is what could happen to us and implicate everyone into different types of problems. So even helping, they've put a restriction on that. So in other words, if you have to give something, you have to know really how you're giving it. Otherwise, just leave them to let them starve and die. It may be easier for that to happen than getting yourself in trouble. So we have to understand that what is happening before us is that they're actually tightening the noose around who they really want to strangle to the end even tighter. So all of the laws that have been implemented is actually to make the Muslim world become weaker in even making an effort to collaborate or to make help available for one another who are facing difficulties, who are facing hardship, that you cannot come together to support one another. Now, this is the perspective of what you see coming out of the West. This is how these things look at to us as Muslims. This is how these things look at. No, we can't retaliate because what can you retaliate and do? There's no way you can. You know, the fact of the matter is that we are so disunited that we can't even come together to move one plant or to do anything good for ourselves. And when we talk about retaliation, we talk about to do something good. This is the level of weakness that we have reached at. So that position has already been established, and the condition of these atrocities will continue, and we have no way of stopping it. So the Western position is this how we see it as what they have done to our eyes, and what we see they continue to harm, and what harm they have done to Muslims. Similarities and parallels between the cultures would only disturb this image, because it would mean recognizing ourselves and the other and blur the distinction. What this means is that if we were to find similarities between Islam and the West, or modern world as we would call it, what I will do is show that there is a level that whatever Islam has, and the fact is that Islam have continually contributed towards the West and have continuously having people, human beings, I would say, who are Muslims, who work and who would spend, who would do business, who would be educated, who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are engineers, who develop and work continuously in the West, who have studied under Western universities, who continuously develop themselves and work together. But yet these things will not be highlighted. The fact is that the person whom we know as Steve Jobs, the man who founded and worked on Apple, the phones that we would use, they never looked at him. His grandfather and great-grandparents, they were all from Syria. But yet, in our time, they would never see him as being somebody who had died recently, but who would have not seen him as being as a potential threat or destruction to the world. Because what he has brought to the world was technology that we use today. So that understanding, that level of, Islam has continuously, and even in our times, many other great, works are done by big, efforts by Muslims in the modern world today, but yet that is cast aside in terms of the contributions. They are recognized, but not to say your religion or your people or your background. None of these things. What is recognized is what is the benefits, but not the person and not the religion or the culture and the effort that is made genuinely. So if it is that you want to look at Islam as being, the laws, that's what the person what they most likely want to take, the laws, the Sharia laws, as being barbaric. That has nothing to do with the laws of the land, because the Sharia law or the laws of the Quran are there to do what? Enhance the moral upbringing of an individual. And that does not mean it has to be implemented on everyone. So in this concept, we must also look at that similarity and that level of coming together will not be brought. Because if that happens, it will show that there's no difference between us. So why fight them? Why destroy this one? Why do that? Why wage war against them? Why put sanctions against them? Why put hardship upon them? Because we are all one and the same human beings. Why have the Muslims not done that to the non-Muslim when they had control? So why reverse and put pressure? It's because of the fear that if the Muslims become united, there's a possibility that the economical control could probably change again. And that is a fear that is real. So Karl Marx himself saw, and this is one of the person who developed capitalism and worked around these modern sciences and industries, himself saw clearly that capitalism is an expansionary force that seeks to subject the whole world into its domination and force it to imitate the West in key areas of social, economic, and political activity. So you have to be congruent and acting on all these areas in order for the West to be politically strong and viable. Its main conflictual drive is competition within itself for profit, markets, power. This argument lacks conviction as it is based on assumption of expansionary character of capitalism, and it seems quite plausible that the West needs some other part of the world, especially one that presents a challenge with which to compete. In this sense, that part of the world is considered to be the enemy. So you have to have somebody that you could look at and say, my system is working and yours is not. But yours cannot work when you see every time, it's like if you're going in a race, two fellas on a bike. And my bike, I'm saying, is better than your bike, but your next partner takes some kind of thing and interfere with the wheel and the axle and the spokes and all these different things in your bike, or fix the chain that when you pull off, the chain go burst, or something will happen to your bike. And he says, see, your bike not good, my bike good. You see, that principle is that the competition is what? Is that you must prove that what I am doing is right as opposed to the other person, what they're doing is wrong. And it's weak and it has flaws and it has weaknesses in it. But the fact is that this is what competition in the theory of Karl Marx is saying. That competition is necessary to prove that you have that strength and power over the other person. So you use tactics to get them in a position that they will always remain weak and you will always remain strong. And that's a theory and a system that is also what a part of capitalism rules the world today with. So we must understand here that Islam today and Muslims today should be thinkers, not that 2% who will go to wage a war and destroy their own selves. But they should be thinkers, people who are intellectual on how to develop and grow and develop a society, whether you live in the Western world, whether you live in the so-called Muslim world. But our target and our destruction should not be ourselves, but how to develop our Islam, our ihsan, our goodness, and that which Allah has blessed us with. If that wealth has not affected our hearts so much, maybe love come back in our heart. Maybe there's some good in this. Maybe what is happening to us today is really to bring back Iman in the hearts of the Muslims. And maybe we have to go down to even further depths to really find that Iman and live and give up the love for this world. So maybe Allah may pluck out that love for the world in a hard way or a harsh way. May Allah save us from that. May Allah save us from that. So we stop at this point, inshallah, and we continue with the Quran standpoint in respect to this particular direction. Inshallah. Let's make dua. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam. Tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa shafi'ina wa habibina wa maulana Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana. وقنا عذاب النار سمعنا وطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين.
حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني أماه طريقي قد وضحى والقلب يسير به فرحا حرب وجهاد مفتقد ودم بالعزة قد نضحا حور العين تنادي